Minho Park stared at the display screen in front of him. The numbers made no sense. He rubbed his tired eyes and looked again. The same impossible readings glowed back at him from the monitors of Luna Station. "This can't be right," he whispered, to himself. Luna Station sat on the dark side of Earth's moon. It was humanity's most advanced deep space monitoring facility. Dozens of powerful sensors pointed out into the black void between stars, always watching, always listening. For 20 years, those sensors had found nothing but empty space and distant starlight. Now they had found something else. The spatial distortion appeared at the edge of the solar system, near Pluto's orbit. Space itself seemed to twist and bend, like heated metal. Energy readings spiked across every instrument. Then, as suddenly as it began, the distortion stopped. Something massive hung in space where nothing had been before. Minho's hands shook as he ran the scans again. The object was enormous. It stretched over 15 kilometers from end to end, larger than any human ship ever built. Its shape defied easy description. Smooth curves blended with sharp angles. Parts of it seemed to fade in and out of sight, as if the ship existed only partly in normal space. "Control, this is Monitor Station 7. Minho spoke into his headset. "I have an unknown contact at grid reference Zulu 97. The response came quickly. "Station 7, please confirm. Your readings. Confirmed control. Unknown vessel. Approximately 15 kilometers in length. No energy signature except gravitational mass." The object appeared through what looked like a spatial fold. Silence filled the communication channel. Minho knew what his supervisor was, thinking. In all of human history, they had never encountered alien life. Every deep space probe, every radio telescope, every search had found nothing. Humanity was alone in the universe. Until now. Admiral Hyun Kim received the alert 30 minutes later aboard the UED Vigilant, flagship of the United Earth Defense Fleet. He was a tall, serious man with gray hair and sharp eyes that had seen 3 decades of military service. In all those years, he had never faced anything like this. "Show me the sensor data," he ordered. The holographic display in the command center lit up with a 3-dimensional image of the solar system. A red dot marked the position of the unknown vessel. "Sir, the object is moving toward the inner system. At approximately 200 kilometers per second, reported his tactical officer. "At current speed, it will reach Earth orbit in approximately 48 hours. Admiral Kim studied the display. The ship's design looked nothing like human technology. Where human vessels were built with straight lines and functional angles, this craft flowed like liquid metal frozen in time. Its surface seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it, making it appear as a hole cut out of space itself. "Have we attempted contact?" the Admiral asked. "Yes, sir. We've transmitted on all known frequencies in 17 different languages, including mathematical sequences. No response." Admiral Kim nodded grimly. "Alert all fleet commanders. I want every available ship moving to intercept positions, and get me a direct line to Earth Command. 300,000 kilometers away." Captain Junho Choi stood on the bridge of the patrol frigate Defiance. His ship was small compared to the fleet's main battle cruisers, but it was fast and well armed. More importantly, it was the closest human vessel to the approaching alien craft. "Captain, we're receiving new orders from Fleet Command." His communications officer reported. Junho read the message on his command screen. "Intercept and observe. Attempt contact. Do not engage unless fired upon. Standard first contact protocols, except there was nothing standard about this situation. Helm, set course. For the unknown vessel. Maximum sustainable speed." "Aye, sir. ETA 37 minutes. Junho looked out through the bridge's main viewport at the stars. Somewhere out there, moving toward them at incredible speed, was proof that humanity was not alone. The thought both thrilled and terrified him. On Earth, Dr. Sora Lee worked frantically in her laboratory at the Xenobiology Institute. Until today, her field of study had been purely theoretical. She had spent years developing protocols for contact with alien life forms that might not exist. Now those protocols might save humanity. "The ship's construction suggests a completely different approach to physics," she explained to the Emergency Council via video link. Look at these curves. Human ships are built to cut through space efficiently. This design seems to work with space itself, bending and flowing with gravitational fields. The council members, politicians, and military leaders from around Earth listened with growing unease. "What does that tell us about its builders?" asked the Secretary General. "They understand space-time manipulation far better than we do. The way it appeared suggests they can fold space, essentially teleporting across vast distances instantly. Their technology is centuries, maybe millennia ahead of ours." The room fell silent. Everyone understood the implications. Captain Junho's frigate reached visual range of the alien vessel 2 hours later. What he saw took his breath away. The ship was beautiful in the way a storm was beautiful, magnificent and terrifying. Its hull seemed to shift and flow like oil on water. No lights marked its surface. No exhaust glowed from engines. It moved through space with impossible silence and grace. "All stop," Junho ordered. "Maintain distance of 50 kilometers. "Sir, should we attempt contact?" Junho nodded. "Open a channel on all frequencies. This is Captain Junho Choi of the United Earth Defense Ship Defiance. You have entered human space without permission. Please identify yourself and state your intentions." They waited. Minutes passed in tense silence. "No response, Captain." "Try again. Use the mathematical greeting sequences." Still nothing. The alien ship continued its steady course toward Earth, ignoring their presence completely. Junho made a decision that would later be debated by military historians. "Fire a warning shot. Single plasma bolt, 50 meters off their bow." The frigate's main, gun charged and fired. A brilliant blue-white bolt of superheated plasma streaked across the gap between the ships. It should have passed harmlessly in front of the alien vessel's nose. Instead, the plasma bolt simply vanished. It struck the ship's hull and disappeared, without any visible effect. No explosion, no energy discharge, no reaction at all. The bolt was simply gone as if it had never existed. "Did our sensors record what happened?" Junho asked. "The plasma bolt appears to have been absorbed completely, sir. No energy reflection, no heat signature, nothing." Junho felt a chill run down his spine. A weapon that could vaporize a small building had struck the alien ship and vanished without a trace. What kind of technology could do that? The alien ship continued toward Earth, unchanged and unmoved by humanity's first aggressive act. Back on Luna Station, Minho Park watched the encounter through the station's long-range sensors. He saw the frigate fire its warning shot. He saw the plasma bolt disappear into the alien hull like a stone dropped into deep water. "Get me Admiral Kim," he said into his communicator. "Priority 1. When the Admiral's face appeared on his screen, Minho spoke quickly. "Sir, the alien vessel just absorbed a direct hit from a plasma cannon. Our weapons appear to have no effect on it whatsoever." Admiral Kim's expression grew grim. "Confirmed. Captain Choi is reporting the same thing. The ship is still approaching. Earth at steady speed." "What are your orders, sir?" The Admiral was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice carried the weight of command and the fear of the unknown. "Continue monitoring. Alert me immediately if the vessel changes course or speed. And pray that whatever's on that ship is more interested in talking than fighting." The alien vessel continued its inexorable approach to Earth. Humanity's first contact with alien intelligence was not going as anyone had hoped. The ship ignored all attempts at communication, absorbed their weapons harmlessly, and showed no signs of slowing down. In less than 40 hours, it would reach Earth orbit. Across human space, emergency broadcast began. Military reserves were called up. Evacuation plans for major population centers were reviewed. Scientists worked around the clock to understand the alien technology. But deep down, everyone knew the same terrible truth. If the beings aboard that ship meant humanity harm, there might be nothing anyone could do to stop them. Lieutenant Nari Song ran through the corridors of Mars Colony Central Command. Red warning lights flashed everywhere. Alarm sirens echoed off the metal walls. All around her, people moved with the controlled panic of a well-practiced emergency. Drill. Except this was not a drill. Evacuation status report, she called out as she entered the main command center. 30% of non-essential personnel have reached the transport ships, replied Commander J. Kim. We're moving as fast as we can, but we have over 10,000 civilians to evacuate. Nari nodded and checked her tablet. The alien vessel had entered the inner solar system 12 hours ago. It had passed Mars orbit without stopping, but its destination was clearly Earth. Still, evacuation protocols demanded that all outer colonies prepare for the worst. What about the defense platforms? She asked. Armed and ready, but after what happened to Captain Choi's plasma shot? Commander Kim didn't finish the sentence. Everyone knew their weapons were useless against the alien ship. High above Mars, her brother Tae-song strapped himself into the cockpit of his fighter craft. The Phoenix Squadron's 12 fighters were the best Mars had to offer. Fast, maneuverable, and armed with the latest human weapons technology. Against the alien vessel, they might as well have been flying paper planes. Phoenix leader to all Phoenix fighters. Tae spoke into his radio. Remember, this is a reconnaissance mission. Get close, gather data, get out. Do not engage unless fired upon. Copy, Phoenix leader, came the replies from his squadron. Tae fired his engines and launched. From the orbital platform, 11 other fighters formed up behind him as they accelerated toward the alien ship's projected course. The shadow ship, as the media had started calling it, was still 18 hours away from Earth. But every hour brought new mysteries. Deep, space sensors showed it was not using any recognizable form of propulsion. It simply moved through space as if the laws of physics bent around it. On Earth, Ambassador Gihan sat in the United Nations Emergency Session Hall. Representatives from every nation on Earth had gathered for humanity's most important meeting. The question before them was simple. How do you negotiate with something that won't talk to you? The alien vessel has ignored all our communication attempts, he reported to the assembly. We've transmitted in every human language mathematical sequences, pictographs, even music. Nothing has gotten a response. The Chinese representative stood up. Perhaps they simply don't understand our technology. Or perhaps they don't care what we have to say, replied the American delegate grimly. Ambassador Han had spent his entire career finding ways for different groups to understand each other. He had negotiated peace treaties, trade agreements, and cultural exchanges. But this was beyond anything in his experience. How do you make peace with something that acts like you don't exist? 18 hours later, Phoenix Squadron reached intercept position. Tae-song had thought the sensor readings were exaggerated. Nothing could be that large. But as the shadow ship came into visual range, he realized the sensors had been wrong. The alien vessel was even bigger than reported. It stretched across space like a city turned sideways. Its dark hull seemed to drink in starlight, creating a ship-shaped hole in the starfield. No lights marked its surface. No energy signatures registered on his instruments except for its massive gravitational field. Phoenix leader to base, Tae transmitted. Visual. Contact confirmed. Beginning close approach, he guided his fighter closer to the alien hull. The ship's surface was smooth as glass, but it seemed to shift and flow like liquid mercury. Patterns moved beneath the surface, too complex for his eyes to follow. I'm reading some kind of activity. Inside the ship, reported Phoenix 3. Energy patterns unlike anything I've seen. Tae was about to respond when everything changed. A wave of force erupted from the shadow ship. It was not an explosion or an energy beam. It was something else entirely. Tae's fighter shuddered as every system on his ship simply stopped working. Engines died. Life support shut down. Communication systems went silent. Even his emergency batteries failed to respond. Phoenix Squadron, report, he called out, but his radio was dead. Through his cockpit window, he could see the other fighters drifting. Helplessly, whatever the shadow ship had done, it had disabled every piece of technology in his squadron instantly. Tae floated in the darkness of his powerless cockpit, watching the alien ship continue its course toward Earth. His fighter's momentum carried him slowly away from the massive vessel, but he was alive. The aliens could have destroyed his squadron in an instant, but they had chosen to simply disable them instead. The question was why. On Earth, the emergency began. Dr. Yun Kang was working in her laboratory at the Quantum Research Institute when Every computer screen in the building suddenly activated at once. She looked up from her calculations to see the same image appearing on monitors throughout the facility. It was not a picture or a video. It was something that bypassed every security system and appeared directly on every electronic display on Earth simultaneously. The image showed a figure that might have been humanoid, but it was difficult to tell. The form seemed to shift and change, as if it existed in more dimensions than human eyes could see. When it spoke, the words did not come through speakers. They appeared directly in the minds of every human being within 100 million kilometers of Earth. Your species has been evaluated. The voice was neither male nor female, young nor old. It simply was, like the sound of time itself speaking. You are found. Interesting. In the United Nations building, Ambassador Han felt the words form in his thoughts like ice crystals. Around him, every delegate sat frozen in their chairs, listening to the impossible voice. Prepare for harvest. Dr. Kang's laboratory fell silent. Her instruments detected no radio transmission, no quantum field disruption, nothing that could explain how the message had reached every human mind simultaneously. The aliens were communicating on a level that human science did not understand. The transmission ended as suddenly as it began. Across Earth, humanity was left with a single, terrifying question. What did harvest mean? Dr. Kang ran to her quantum consciousness research files. For years, she had studied the theoretical connection between consciousness and quantum mechanics. Her work suggested that human thoughts and memories might exist as quantum patterns that could theoretically be read or even extracted. If the aliens possessed technology that could manipulate quantum consciousness directly, they might not be interested in Earth's resources or strategic position. They might be after something far more precious. They might be harvesting human souls. The thought sent chills through her as she began running calculations. If her theory was correct, the aliens possessed technology that could extract and store human consciousness. Every human being on Earth might be facing something worse than death. They might be facing the theft of everything that made them human. High above Earth, the shadow ship settled into orbit. It made no aggressive moves, launched no attack craft, and sent no further communications. It simply waited, patient and motionless, like a predator studying its prey. On the planet below, humanity realized that their first contact with alien intelligence was not going to be the peaceful meeting they had always imagined. The beings aboard the shadow ship saw humans not as potential allies or even enemies to be respected. They saw them as crops to be harvested. Emergency meetings convened in every major city. Military forces mobilized across the globe. Scientists worked desperately to understand the alien technology and find some way to defend against it. But as the hours passed, one thing became clear. Humanity faced an enemy whose technology was so advanced that they could disable entire fighter squadrons with a thought and communicate directly with human minds across interplanetary distances. The harvest was coming, and humanity had no idea how to stop it. In her laboratory, Dr. Kang studied quantum field equations until her eyes burned. Somewhere in the mathematics of consciousness and reality, there had to be an answer. There had to be some way for humanity to fight back against technology that treated the laws of physics as suggestions, because the alternative was unthinkable. If the aliens could harvest human consciousness, then every person on Earth faced a fate worse than extinction. They faced the possibility of being trapped forever in some alien collection, aware but helpless, while their bodies became empty shells. The shadow ship hung in Earth's sky like a dark moon, waiting for its harvest to begin. Fleet Admiral Dong Park stood at the head of the war room table, looking at the faces of humanity's military leaders. These men and women had trained for decades to defend Earth from human enemies. None of them had prepared for this. "The situation is clear," Admiral Park said, his voice steady despite the gravity of their circumstances. "We face an enemy with technology far beyond our own. Conventional weapons have proven useless. The alien vessel has demonstrated the ability to disable our technology and communicate directly with our minds." General Soo Kim, head of Special Operations, leaned forward. "What about nuclear weapons? Even if their hull can absorb energy, A direct nuclear strike might overwhelm their defenses. Engineer Wan Li shook his head. Our analysis suggests their hull doesn't just absorb energy. It somehow redirects it to another dimension. A nuclear weapon would likely have the same effect as Captain Choi's plasma bolt. It would simply disappear. The room fell quiet. Every person present understood the implications. Humanity's most powerful weapons were useless against the shadow ship. There has to be something, said Captain Ray Choi, commander of the heavy cruiser Indomitable. She was Junho's sister, and like him, she refused to give up easily. No technology is perfect. Every system has weaknesses. Admiral Park nodded. Which is why we're here. We need to think beyond conventional warfare. If our weapons can't touch them from the outside, what about getting inside? Wan Li pulled up a holographic display. We've been analyzing the ship's structure. The hull appears to be one continuous piece with no visible entry points, but our sensors have detected what might be maintenance or docking ports on the underside. Could we get small craft close enough to investigate? Asked General Kim. Maybe, but we'd need something that could avoid their detection systems. Captain Ray stood up. What about using maintenance drones? They're small, low-powered, and not obviously threatening. We could modify them to carry nuclear charges. The suggestion was desperate, but it was the first plan that offered any hope of reaching the alien ship's interior. Meanwhile, Dr. Sora Lee worked frantically in her laboratory, trying to understand how the shadow ship's technology functioned. Her xenobiology expertise was useless against aliens whose biology she couldn't study, so she had turned to physics. The ship exists partially in our dimension, and partially in what appears to be folded space, she explained to Admiral Park via video link. That's why our weapons pass through it. We're shooting at something that's only halfway there. Is there a way to force it completely into our dimension? The Admiral asked. Maybe. The phasing isn't constant. Our sensors show fluctuations in the dimensional field every few hours. During these fluctuations, the ship becomes more solid, more present in normal space. What causes these fluctuations? Dr. Lee hesitated. Based on the timing and energy patterns, I believe they occur when the ship is actively scanning or harvesting. When they use their consciousness extraction technology, it requires them to be more solidly present in our reality. The implication was chilling. The ship was most vulnerable when it was feeding on human minds. Across the solar system, other preparations were underway. Pilot Hay Park sat in the cockpit of humanity's most advanced stealth fighter, the Ghost Blade. The experimental craft used quantum field manipulation to bend light around its hull, making it nearly invisible to most sensors. Remember, her mission commander said through the radio, this is reconnaissance only. Get close enough to map their hull structure and identify any weak points. Do not engage under any circumstances. Hai nodded, though she knew the mission was likely suicide. The shadow ship had detected and disabled Phoenix Squadron without apparent effort. Her stealth systems might buy her a few extra minutes, but against technology that could manipulate space-time directly, she was flying on borrowed time. Ghostblade requesting permission to launch. Permission granted. Good luck, pilot. Hay fired her engines and accelerated toward the shadow ship. Her craft was small and fast, but as Earth fell away behind her, she felt the weight of humanity's hope pressing down on her shoulders. On the planet below, Dr. Yun Kang made a breakthrough that would change everything. She had been studying the quantum patterns recorded during the aliens' telepathic message. The communication had not used radio waves or any known energy transmission. Instead, it had somehow manipulated the quantum fields that connected all conscious minds. They're operating on a consciousness level we barely understand, she explained to her research team. But the process requires them to synchronize their quantum frequency with ours. During that synchronization, they become vulnerable to quantum interference. Her assistant looked up from his calculations. You mean we could disrupt their consciousness the same way they're disrupting ours? Theoretically, yes. But it would require an enormous amount of quantum energy, more than any of our computers can generate. What about overloading the quantum processors? If we pushed them beyond their safety limits, Dr. Kang paused. That would destroy the computers entirely, and whoever was operating them would likely be killed by the quantum backlash. The room fell silent as the implications sank. They might have found a way to hurt the shadow ship, but it would require a suicide mission. Commander Bo Yun, head of the Experimental Weapons Division, received Dr. Kang's report 30 minutes later. He immediately began calculating the requirements for a quantum cascade weapon. The mathematics were brutal. To generate enough quantum interference to disrupt the aliens' consciousness manipulation, they would need to overload at least 50 quantum computers simultaneously. The explosion would vaporize everything within a kilometer radius. But more importantly, someone would need to get that close to the shadow ship and trigger the device manually. The quantum interference would prevent any remote detonation system from functioning. It was a one-way mission. When Admiral Park received the report, he immediately called for volunteers. The message went out to every ship in the fleet, every military base on Earth, and every space station in human territory. The response was overwhelming. Captain Junho Choi was the first to volunteer, followed by his sister Ray. Pilot Tae Song, recently rescued from his disabled fighter, requested the mission despite having no chance of survival. Hundreds of others stepped forward, each demanding the honor of striking back at humanity's would-be destroyers. But while the military planned its desperate gambit, Pilot Hay Park was already approaching the shadow ship on her reconnaissance mission. Her stealth systems worked better than expected. She managed to reach within 5 kilometers of the alien hull before her instruments detected any scanning activity. The ship was truly massive up close, its dark surface rippling with patterns that hurt to look at directly. Ghostblade to control, she whispered into her radio, beginning detailed scan of the hull structure. Her sensors revealed something surprising. The ship was not solid metal or any known material. Instead, it appeared to be constructed from millions of small crystalline structures arranged in complex geometric patterns. Some of these structures pulsed with faint energy, while others remained dark and inactive. Control. I'm reading what appear to be thousands of individual crystal formations built into the hull. Some are active, some are dormant. It's almost like... He's voice trailed off as the terrible realization hit her. Control. These aren't hull components, they're storage units. The entire ship is covered in crystalline containers, and some of them have life signs inside. The shadow ship wasn't just a vessel. It was a collection chamber filled with the preserved consciousness of thousands of beings from dozens of worlds. Every crystal held the mind and memories of someone who had been harvested. As Hay transmitted her discovery back to Earth, the shadow ship finally detected her presence. But instead of disabling her fighter, it did something far worse. A beam of energy reached out from the alien hull and touched her craft. Ho felt something tugging at her mind, trying to pull her consciousness out of her body. She experienced flashes of memories that weren't her own, the final moments of other species that had been harvested by the shadow ship. She saw worlds burning as their populations were drained of consciousness. She felt the terror of beings who found their minds being torn from their bodies while their bodies remained alive but empty. She witnessed the harvest of entire civilizations, their knowledge and experiences stored in crystal containers for purposes she couldn't comprehend. Ghostblade to control, she screamed into her radio as her vision began to blur. They're not just invaders, they're collectors. They harvest consciousness from entire species. The transmission cut off as Hay's fighter began to lose power, but her message had reached Earth, and with it, humanity finally understood the true horror they faced. The shadow ship wasn't planning to destroy humanity. It was planning to collect them, storing human consciousness in crystal prisons while leaving their bodies as empty shells. It was a fate far worse than death, but Hay's sacrifice had given humanity something precious, the knowledge that their enemy could be touched during the harvesting process. When the aliens reached out to drain human minds, they became vulnerable. The question was whether humanity could strike back before it was too late. Hay Park fought against the invisible force pulling at her mind. Her fighter's instruments showed impossible readings, energy patterns that seemed to reach directly into her brain. Through her fading vision, she could see the shadow ship's crystalline hull segments glowing brighter as they tried to extract her consciousness. But the harvesting process wasn't perfect. As the alien technology synchronized with her human mind, Hay experienced something the shadow ship's creators had not expected. She began to see fragments of memories from the thousands of beings already trapped in the ship's crystal storage units. An alien scientist from a world of endless oceans, desperately working to find a defense against the harvesters before his species was wiped out. A warrior from a desert planet leading the last battle against shadow ships that had come to collect his people. A child from a crystalline world, hiding in caves while the harvesters took everyone she had ever known. Memories came in flashes, each one showing the same pattern. The shadow ships arrived at populated worlds, announced their intention to harvest, and then proceeded to drain the consciousness from every living being. Some species fought back, others tried to negotiate. A few attempted to flee to other star systems. None had succeeded, but in those final moments before her consciousness was torn from her body, Hay discovered something crucial. Every species that had been harvested had tried the same defensive strategies. They had used energy weapons, nuclear devices, and even antimatter bombs. All had failed because they were fighting the ship's physical hull. The shadow ships were vulnerable during the harvesting process, but not to conventional weapons. They became susceptible to attacks on the same quantum consciousness level they used to extract mines. With her last conscious thought, Hai managed to activate her fighter's emergency beacon. The beacon contained not just a distress signal, but all the sensor data her ship had collected about the shadow ship's hull structure and the horrifying discovery of the crystal storage chambers. The signal reached Earth just as Hay's consciousness was pulled into one of the ship's crystal prisons, leaving her body floating lifeless in the cockpit of her drifting fighter. Dr. Yun Kang received the data 20 minutes later. Her hands shook as she analyzed Hay's final transmission. The sensor readings confirmed her worst fears about the aliens' harvesting technology, but they also revealed something hopeful. The quantum field fluctuations during the harvesting process are massive, she told her research team. Look at these readings. The ship's dimensional phasing becomes unstable when they're actively extracting consciousness. If we could generate a quantum cascade at exactly the right frequency, her assistant looked up from his computer. We could disrupt their entire consciousness collection system. More than that, a properly tuned quantum cascade could potentially free every stored consciousness in their crystal chambers. We could turn their own weapon against them. But the technical requirements were even more demanding than they had first calculated. The quantum cascade would need to be generated at point-blank range during an active harvesting attempt. The timing would have to be perfect, and the person delivering the weapon would have no chance of survival. Commander Bo Yun worked through the night to design the weapon Dr. Kang had described. The quantum cascade device required 50 modified quantum computers linked together in a feedback loop. When activated, the computers would overload their quantum processors simultaneously, creating a wave of quantum interference powerful enough to disrupt the aliens' consciousness manipulation technology. The device was too large for any fighter craft. It would need to be carried by a bomber, and the bomber would need to get within 1 kilometer of the shadow ship during an active harvesting event. It's a suicide mission, Bo told Admiral Park when he presented the plans. The quantum explosion will destroy everything within a 5-kilometer radius. There's no way for the pilot to survive. Admiral Park studied the technical specifications. How long do we have to build this thing? With every engineer working around the clock? 18 hours. Do it. Across human space, every available resource was mobilized for the construction of humanity's last hope. Quantum computers were stripped from research facilities and military installations. Engineers worked without rest to modify the processors and link them into the cascade device. Meanwhile, the shadow ship began its harvest. It started with the space stations. The alien vessel moved slowly through Earth's orbital space, reaching out with invisible beams to extract consciousness from anyone within range. Space Station Alpha, home to 3,000 people, was the first target. Dr. Sora Lee watched in horror from Luna Station as the harvesting began. Her instruments detected massive quantum field distortions as the shadow ship synchronized with human consciousness patterns. One by one, the life signs aboard Space Station Alpha began to change. The bodies remained alive, hearts beating, lungs breathing, brains showing electrical activity. But something essential was gone. The consciousness, the spark that made each person unique, had been extracted and stored in the shadow ship's crystal chambers. "They're not killing them," she reported to Admiral Park. "They're taking their minds and leaving empty shells behind." The Admiral's face was grim on the video screen. "How long before they reach Earth's surface?" "At current rate, 6 hours. But sir, our quantum cascade weapon won't be ready for another 12 hours. Then we buy time. All fleet units converge on the shadow ship. Full assault pattern. Make them focus on us instead of the civilian population." Every human warship in the solar system accelerated toward Earth. Cruisers, destroyers, frigates, and fighters, over 200 vessels in total. Their weapons were useless against the shadow ship, but they might serve as a distraction. Captain Ray Choi commanded the attack from the bridge of the Indomitable. She watched her tactical display fill with green dots representing the human fleet as they closed in on the massive alien vessel. "All ships, this is Indomitable. Begin attack run. Target the ship's underside where Pilot Park identified the crystal. Storage chambers." The fleet opened fire simultaneously. Plasma bolts, missile salvos, and kinetic projectiles streaked across space toward the shadow ship. As expected, every weapon simply vanished into the alien hull without effect. But the attack achieved its goal. The shadow ship stopped harvesting Space Station Alpha and turned its attention to the attacking fleet. What happened next was unlike any battle in human history. The shadow ship did not return fire with conventional weapons. Instead, it reached out with the same consciousness-extracting beams it had used on the space station. But this time, it targeted not individuals but entire ship crews at once. Captain Ray felt the invisible force trying to pull her mind from her body. Around her, her bridge crew collapsed one by one as their consciousness was torn away. She fought against the harvesting beam, holding on to her sense of self through sheer willpower. Across the fleet, the same horror was repeated. Ships continued to function as their automated systems maintained course and speed, but their crews were being systematically harvested. Within minutes, dozens of vessels drifted through space, carrying only empty human shells. But the sacrifice bought precious time. The shadow ship's harvesting beams were occupied with the fleet, giving the civilian population several more hours before the aliens turned their attention to Earth's surface. In his makeshift laboratory, Commander Bo Yun made the final adjustments to the quantum cascade weapon. The device filled the entire cargo bay of a military bomber, its 50 linked quantum computers humming with barely contained energy. "The targeting system is automated," he explained to Admiral Park. "Once activated, the device will seek out the strongest quantum consciousness field and detonate at optimal range. But someone needs to fly it there and trigger the activation sequence manually. Why can't it be done remotely? The quantum interference will disrupt any remote signal. The pilot has to be physically present to start the cascade." Admiral Park nodded grimly. "Then we need a volunteer." Captain Junho Choi stepped forward immediately. "Sir, I request permission to pilot the mission." "Denied. I need experienced commanders for the fleet battle." "Then I volunteer," said Lieutenant Narration, who had been coordinating evacuation efforts. "My transport experience qualifies me for bomber operations." Before Admiral Park could respond, dozens of other voices spoke up. Pilots, engineers, communications officers, even civilian volunteers, all demanding the chance to deliver humanity's final strike against the shadow ship. The Admiral looked around the room at the faces of humanity's defenders. In their eyes, he saw something the alien harvesters had not expected to find. They saw not fear or despair, but determination. The shadow ship had made a critical error in its evaluation of human nature. Humanity did not surrender easily. "Captain Choi," Admiral Park said finally, "you have the mission, but you won't be going alone." The Admiral's plan was simple but dangerous. While Junho delivered the quantum cascade weapon, every remaining human ship would engage the shadow ship simultaneously. The massive distraction would force the aliens to divide their attention between multiple targets, hopefully giving Junho the chance to get close enough to trigger the device. As the modified bomber Prometheus Unbound was prepared for launch, Junho recorded a final message to be transmitted to Earth. To anyone, Captain Junho Choi sat in the cockpit of the Prometheus Unbound, his hands steady on the controls, despite knowing he was flying toward certain death. Behind him, the quantum cascade weapon hummed with barely contained energy. 50 linked quantum computers waited for his signal to overload their processors and create the massive interference wave that might save humanity. Prometheus to fleet. Command, he said into his radio. Beginning final approach. ETA to target. 8 minutes. Admiral Park's voice came back immediately. Copy, Prometheus. All fleet units are standing by for diversionary attack. You'll have every chance we can give you. Around Earth, the remnants of humanity's space fleet prepared for their last battle. The shadow ship had already harvested most of their crews, leaving automated systems and the few survivors who had resisted the consciousness extraction beams. It wasn't much of a fleet anymore, but it would have to be enough. The shadow ship hung motionless above Earth's Pacific Ocean, its harvesting beams reaching down toward the planet's surface. Major cities around the world reported the same terrifying phenomenon, people collapsing in the streets as their consciousness was drained away, leaving behind living bodies with empty minds. Dr. Sora Lee monitored the harvesting process from Luna Station, her instruments tracking the quantum field distortions as millions of human minds were torn from their bodies. The harvesting rate is accelerating, she reported to Admiral Park. They're processing approximately 10,000 consciousness extractions per minute. At this rate, Earth's entire population will be harvested within 12 hours. How long do we have before the weapon is ready? The Admiral asked. Captain Choi is 7 minutes out, but he needs the shadow ship to be actively harvesting when he triggers the cascade. The quantum synchronization only makes them vulnerable during the extraction process. Admiral Park looked at his tactical display. The shadow ship was already harvesting, but its attention was focused on Earth's surface. They needed to make it focus on the attacking fleet instead, to create the quantum synchronization necessary for the weapon to work. All ships, he broadcast to the surviving fleet. Begin final attack run. Make them notice us. The remaining human vessels, 12 cruisers, 30 destroyers, and over 100 smaller craft, accelerated toward the shadow ship. Their crews were mostly automated systems now, with only a handful of human survivors who had somehow resisted the consciousness extraction. Captain Ray Choi, who had managed to maintain control of the Indomitable through pure stubborn will, led the charge. Her ship was running on backup power. Most of her crew had been harvested, but her main gun still worked. All ships, concentrate fire on the crystal storage chambers, she ordered. Let's make them angry. The human fleet opened fire with everything they had. Plasma bolts, nuclear missiles, kinetic projectiles, and experimental energy weapons all struck the shadow ship simultaneously. As before, the weapons vanished harmlessly into the alien hull, but the massive coordinated assault had the desired effect. The shadow ship stopped harvesting Earth's surface and turned its attention to the attacking fleet. Its consciousness extraction beams reached out toward the human ships, seeking to drain the minds of any remaining crew members. This was exactly what Junho had been waiting for. Prometheus to all ships, he transmitted. The shadow ship is focusing on the fleet, beginning final approach. His bomber accelerated toward the massive alien vessel, staying low and using the larger human ships as cover. The quantum cascade weapon in his cargo bay was fully charged and ready to trigger, but the shadow ship detected his approach at the last moment. Junho felt the familiar tugging sensation as an extraction beam locked onto his fighter. The aliens were trying to harvest his consciousness while he was still 2 kilometers away from optimal detonation range. His vision began to blur as his mind was pulled toward the alien collectors. Not yet, he whispered, fighting against the consciousness extraction. Not yet. He pushed his bomber's engines beyond their safety limits, racing toward the shadow ship as his awareness began to fragment. Through his fading vision, He could see the alien hull growing larger, its crystal storage chambers glowing with the light of harvested souls. In those final moments, as his consciousness was being torn from his body, Junho experienced the same phenomenon that Hyde Park had encountered. He began to see fragments of memories from the beings already trapped in the shadow ship's crystal prisons. But this time, something different happened. The quantum cascade weapon in his cargo bay was still connected to his ship's computer systems. As Junho's consciousness was pulled into the shadow ship's harvesting beam, the weapon's quantum processors detected the synchronization frequency between his mind and the alien collection system. The weapon activated automatically. 50 quantum. Computers overloaded their processors simultaneously, creating a cascade of quantum interference that spread outward from Junho's bomber at the speed of light. The wave of quantum energy struck the shadow ship, just as its harvesting beam was synchronized with human consciousness patterns. The effect was catastrophic for the aliens. The quantum cascade disrupted every consciousness extraction process happening simultaneously across the shadow ship. The vessel's crystal storage chambers began to malfunction as the interference wave tore through their quantum containment fields. But more importantly, the cascade began to reverse the harvesting process. Dr. Yun Kang watched in amazement from her laboratory as her instruments detected massive quantum field fluctuations around the shadow ship. "The cascade is working," she shouted to her research team. "The alien consciousness extraction systems are failing." Across the shadow ship's hull, crystal storage chambers began to crack and shatter. The quantum interference had not just disrupted the harvesting process. It had destabilized the entire consciousness collection system. Thousands of stored minds, beings from dozens of different worlds who had been harvested over the centuries, began to break free from their crystal prisons. But without bodies to return to, they existed as pure consciousness, quantum patterns floating in space around the damaged shadow ship. On Earth's surface, something miraculous began to happen. People who had been harvested just minutes earlier suddenly opened their eyes and stood up. Their consciousness, which had been in the process of being extracted, snapped back to their bodies as the alien collection system failed. Space Station Alpha came back to life as its crew awakened from their harvesting-induced coma. Across the human fleet, officers who had been reduced to empty shells suddenly returned to awareness. Captain Ray Choi gasped as her full consciousness returned. Around her, her bridge crew was stirring back to life, confusion and relief on their faces. "Status report," she called out. "Captain, the shadow ship is showing massive system failures," her tactical officer reported. "Hull breaches on multiple levels, power fluctuations throughout the vessel." But the shadow ship was not defeated, yet. As its consciousness collection systems failed, the alien vessel began to revert to more conventional weapons. Energy beams lanced out from its hull, no longer attempting to harvest human minds but simply trying to destroy the attacking fleet. "All ships, evasive maneuvers," Admiral Park broadcast. "The alien ship is transitioning to conventional weapons." The true battle that followed was unlike anything humanity had ever experienced. The shadow ship, damaged but still enormously powerful, fought with weapons that bent space and time. Human ships vanished into pocket dimensions, were aged to dust in seconds or simply ceased to exist as reality was rewritten around them. But for the first time since the shadow ship had arrived, humanity was fighting back effectively. The quantum cascade had disrupted the aliens' dimensional phasing technology. Their hull was now solid, present in normal space and vulnerable to human weapons. "All ships concentrate fire on the hull breaches," Captain Ray commanded. "Pour everything we have into those weak points." Human plasma bolts and nuclear missiles, which had been useless before, now struck the shadow ship and exploded with devastating effect. Sections of the alien hull began to buckle and tear under the assault. But even as the shadow ship took damage, it was sending a final transmission. Dr. Sora Lee detected the quantum communication burst from Luna Station. "It's a broad-spectrum transmission," she reported to Admiral Park. "High-powered, directed toward the galactic core." "What kind of transmission?" "Unknown, but it contains detailed information about our solar system, our technology levels, and our military capabilities." "Sir, I think they're reporting back to their home fleet," The implications were terrifying. The shadow ship might be dying, but it was ensuring that other ships of its kind would know about humanity's existence and capabilities. As if responding to her fears, the shadow ship's transmission suddenly cut off. The massive vessel shuddered as internal explosions began to tear it apart from the inside. The freed consciousness of thousands of harvested beings had found a way to strike back at their captors. The ancient minds that had been stored in crystal prisons for centuries had learned to exist as pure quantum consciousness. Now, they were using that knowledge to attack the shadow ship's systems from within, corrupting its compu. The shadow ship died like a wounded star, its hull breaking apart in brilliant explosions that lit up Earth's night sky. Captain Ray Choi watched from the bridge of the Indomitable as sections of the massive alien vessel tore away and tumbled toward Earth's atmosphere, burning up like meteors. All ships, maintain safe distance, Admiral Park broadcast to the fleet. We don't know what kind of radiation or exotic matter that thing might be releasing. But even as humanity celebrated their victory, the implications of the shadow ship's final transmission weighed heavily on everyone's minds. Dr. Sora Lee had detected the quantum communication burst just before the vessel's destruction. The aliens had sent detailed information about humanity's capabilities and location to their home fleet. On Luna Station, Dr. Yoon Kang worked frantically to analyze the quantum patterns left behind by the shadow ship's destruction. What she found changed everything humanity thought they knew about the universe. The quantum cascade didn't just free the harvested consciousness, she explained to the Emergency Council via video link. It created a permanent connection between their minds and our quantum field networks. We now have access to the memories and knowledge of every species the shadow ship ever harvested. The implications were staggering. Humanity suddenly had access to the accumulated knowledge of dozens of civilizations, their technologies, their histories, their understanding of the cosmos. It was the greatest treasure trove of information in human history. But it came with a terrible warning. Among the freed consciousness was the mind of Krentar, a scientist from a world called Vorth Prime. His species had been harvested 3 centuries earlier, but his consciousness had remained aware during his crystal imprisonment. Through the quantum link, he was able to communicate directly with human scientists. Your species has achieved something remarkable. Krentar's translated thoughts appeared on Dr. Kang's computer screen. In 5,000 years of shadow ship operations, no species has ever successfully destroyed one of their vessels. How many ships are there? Dr. Kang typed back. The harvesters operate over 200 shadow ships across this spiral arm of the galaxy. Each ship carries the harvested consciousness of millions of beings. Your victory today has freed only a tiny fraction of their total collection. The news was sobering, but Krentar had more to share. The ship that attacked you was young and inexperienced by harvester standards. It made the mistake of underestimating your species' capacity for resistance. When the home fleet arrives, they will not make the same error. How long do we have? The transmission your ship sent was a standard harvest report. The nearest harvester fleet is approximately 50 light-years away. With their space-folding technology, they could arrive within 2 to 3 Earth years. 58 months. That was how long humanity had to prepare for the arrival of an enemy fleet that would not underestimate them. But humanity was no longer the same species that had been caught unprepared by the first shadow ship. Dr. Wan Li, the engineer who had helped design the quantum cascade weapon, began working immediately on new defensive technologies based on the alien knowledge now available to humanity. The freed consciousness of harvested species included engineers, scientists, and military strategists from dozens of different worlds. We have access to technologies that are centuries ahead of our current capabilities, he reported to Admiral Park. Dimensional phasing, consciousness manipulation, space-time folding, all of it is now within our understanding. How long will it take to build defenses based on this knowledge? With every human engineer and scientist working together, and with the guidance of these alien minds, maybe 2 years if we push ourselves to the absolute limit. It would be close, but it might be enough. Captain Junho Choi's sacrifice had given humanity more than just victory over a single enemy ship. His quantum cascade weapon had opened doorways to knowledge and technologies that would transform human civilization forever. But first, there was the matter of the harvested humans who had been freed from the shadow ship's crystal chambers. 3 million human consciousness had been extracted before the cascade weapon destroyed the alien collection system. Most had been successfully returned to their bodies when the harvesting process was reversed, but some had been stored for too long. Their bodies had died while their minds were imprisoned in crystal. These bodiless human consciousness now existed as pure quantum patterns, similar to the harvested aliens. Dr. Kang worked with xenobiologists and quantum physicists to find a solution. "We can create artificial bodies for them," she explained to the families of the affected humans. "Using the harvester consciousness transfer technology, we can give them new physical forms. They won't be exactly human anymore, but they'll be alive and aware." The first successful consciousness transfer happened 6 weeks after the shadow ship's destruction. Lieutenant Hay Park, whose consciousness had been among the first harvested by the aliens, opened her eyes in a new artificial body that looked human, but was enhanced with quantum consciousness interfaces. "I remember everything," she said, her voice slightly different but unmistakably her own. "Not just my own memories, but fragments from every being that was harvested. We have access to thousands of years of accumulated knowledge and experience." Hay and the other consciousness transfer survivors became humanity's first generation of enhanced humans, beings who existed partially in normal space and partially in quantum consciousness dimensions. They could interface directly with advanced alien technologies and serve as bridges between human and alien knowledge. But even as humanity celebrated these technological breakthroughs, they did not forget the cost of their victory. Captain Junho Choi was posthumously awarded humanity's highest honor for his sacrifice. His sister Ray, now promoted to admiral, stood at the memorial ceremony and spoke for all of humanity. "My brother and the thousands of others who died defending Earth did not sacrifice themselves for revenge or conquest," she said. "They died to prove that humanity will not be harvested like crops. We are not cattle to be collected by cosmic predators. We are human beings, and we choose our own destiny." The ceremony was broadcast across human space and transmitted to the freed alien consciousness as well. Species after species, minds that had been imprisoned for centuries in crystal chambers, witnessed humanity's determination to resist the harvesters. Many chose to join the human resistance. Krentar of Vorth Prime became humanity's first alien advisor, sharing his species' advanced understanding of quantum physics. A warrior philosopher named Zeth Moore from the desert world of Kalar taught human soldiers new combat techniques designed specifically for fighting consciousness harvesting. Enemies, artists and poets from a dozen different worlds began collaborating with human creators to develop new forms of expression that celebrated the value of free consciousness. But the most important contribution came from an unexpected source. Among the freed consciousness was an ancient being known only as the Architect. This entity had been one of the first species ever harvested by the shadow ships over 10,000 years earlier. Its people had been master builders who constructed vast space habitats and artificial worlds. "Your species has done something we thought impossible," the Architect communicated through quantum link. "You have not just defeated the harvesters, you have turned their own weapon against them. This gives me hope that our ancient plan might finally be possible." "What plan?" Dr. Kang asked. "For 10,000 years we have been planning our revenge from within the crystal prisons. Every species harvested by the shadow ships has contributed to a vast network of consciousness that spans the galaxy. We have been waiting for a species capable of breaking free and leading a resistance." The Architect revealed that the freed consciousness of every harvested species had been secretly working together for millennia, sharing knowledge and developing strategies. They had been waiting for a species like humanity, one that would refuse to surrender and find a way to fight back effectively. "We can teach you to build ships that phase between dimensions," the Architect explained. "We can show you how to create weapons that attack consciousness directly. Most importantly, we can guide you to the location of the harvester homeworld. This was humanity's true destiny, They were not just defending Earth anymore. They had become the leaders of the galaxy's greatest resistance movement. Admiral Park, now promoted to Supreme Fleet Commander, addressed the United Earth Assembly 1 year after the shadow ship's destruction. "We stand at a crossroads," he said. "We can fortify Earth and wait for the next attack, or we can take the fight to the enemy. The freed consciousness of 100 harvested species stands ready to fight alongside us. They offer us technologies beyond our wildest dreams and knowledge of enemy weaknesses accumulated over millennia. We have 57 months before the Harvester fleet arrives. We can spend that time building walls around Earth, or we can spend it building ships capable of carrying the fight across the galaxy." The vote was unanimous. Humanity chose to fight. Construction began immediately on humanity's first interdimensional fleet. Ships that could fold space like the shadow ships, weapons that could disrupt consciousness harvesting on a massive scale, and enhanced human crews who could interface directly.